Hey guys, it's Destiny, and today we're going to be discussing everything you need to know about Yukong from her pros, cons, rotation ideas, and so on. Without further ado, let's get straight into it. To begin, I'd like to discuss Yukong's kit, which was officially revealed. Yukong's kit is unique as it relies heavily on turn order, as her skill allows her to create Roaring Bowstrings, which increases all teammates' attack by a percentage for 2 turns. These turns are based on your teammates' turns, so if an ally goes after her skill, that will take up 1 turn of the buffs from Roaring Bowstrings. Then if another ally goes afterwards, it uses up that final bowstring since she only has 2, which means the attack increase will only last for those 2 turns, so turn order will be quite essential to being successful with Yukong. An ideal rotation would likely be Yukong going before your main DPS, as they can take advantage of the attack increase that Yukong can provide with her skill. Here's just a visual example of what I mean. As you can see, Yukong would be first, then your main DPS for the first stack. The second stack would be used by the next ally, so maybe preferably a sub DPS, or just whoever you would want to have that attack increase, and then whoever is afterwards will have no stacks available for them. I'll get into this a bit more in depth later on in the video in regards to speed and team compositions, but for her ultimate, Yukong will attack an enemy and also increase crit rate and crit damage of all allies if she has those Roaring Bowstrings as mentioned before active. Ideally, using Yukong's skill and then ultimate afterwards would be good, as your allies will be able to take advantage of the attack increase, a crit rate increase, and a crit damage increase, which can boost your overall damage potential by quite a lot. Another cool thing is Yukong should be able to take advantage of these buffs herself, since if you use a skill and then ultimate, her damage from the ultimate should be buffed up from her own skill kit, which is really nice overall. Her technique allows her to speed up to Sonic levels of speed, which is kind of funny since she ran 6 red lights before, and I bet it was from how fast she is. In all seriousness though, it allows her to run faster in the overworld and also start the battle with 2 stacks of Roaring Bowstrings, which can be beneficial if your Yukong is on the slower side compared to your teammates. As for her talent, it allows her basic attack to deal additional imaginary damage, as well as increase the toughness reducing damage of the attack. This is really nice if your Yukong is fast enough so she can skill in the normal attack in a turn cycle, which makes her skill point neutral, and also allows her to take advantage of her basic attacks being enhanced. Overall, Yukong has an incredible skill kit that looks really promising. Before we get into Yukong's pros and cons, if you're enjoying the video, make sure to subscribe and become part of the Loomies community, and now let's carry on. As for Yukong's role, her goal is to buff your teammates' attack, crit rate, and crit damage, which can result in a lot of damage potential and can possibly even further enhance hyper carry teams, as now they'll have another option to become even stronger. Yukong will be able to make your DPS characters without much crit rate or crit damage still be able to crit more effectively and do more damage when they do have critical hits due to the crit damage increase, so overall she'll be really useful for that. She is also an imaginary character, and because of this she can possibly be a good option for break potential, as she could delay enemies in turn orders by imprisoning them through break, so overall she has a pretty good role for being a supportive character. Yukong can either be a sub DPS or a full-on support, since she can buff her own stats as well as the teams, so she can possibly do her own damage output. You'll likely need a good amount of sustain though to ensure Yukong stays well and alive during fights, but it'll be nice overall to possibly look into a sub DPS Yukong. As for support Yukong, you'll primarily want to focus on making sure she's alive, as she'll be continuously buffing your teammates as much as possible, which allows you to use sets like Fleet of the Ageless, as it'll increase your team's attack even more, assuming that she gets 120 or more speed. For sub DPS Yukong, I'd primarily look at the Wastelander set, the Musketeer set, the Space Ceiling set, and more. And for support, possibly the Fleet of the Ageless. Now if we were to talk about the negatives or the cons of Yukong, she has a few cons, which is that she's very turn cycle dependent and her buffs last for a very short amount of time. Due to this, you'll have to plan a team accordingly in order to ensure Yukong is benefiting the correct teammates, and that there's good energy regeneration for her so that she can use her ultimate more often for the team to benefit from. You may also have to speed tune your team in order to make Yukong fit more properly for rotations, but now let's discuss those possibilities. Due to Yukong being reliant on turn order as mentioned, you can either build a slower Yukong or build a faster one. Yukong being slow will be reliant on her technique in order to have your main DPS have that initial buff in the start of a turn cycle or the start of battle. But the benefit can be if your DPS character is a character that can gain speed through their skill kit and possibly become faster than your Yukong, then Yukong being slower can ensure that she can use a skill at the end of the turn, and now your teammate will still be able to have that buff for the following turn. The main downside of this though is that Yukong will likely always have to use skill points every single turn and be really reliant on her technique, at least for that initial buff. Now, if your Yukong is faster and can outspeed who you want on your team, then she can always try to ensure that she is able to use her skill for the buff on the first turn, and then if she goes again in that turn cycle, she can basic attack and be skill point neutral. This will also allow her to take advantage of her talent that enhances her basic attack. This also will allow her to regenerate more energy within turn cycles due to her being able to skill and then normal attack. 134 speed and above will allow you to go twice in certain turn cycles, while if your Yukong is slower, then you'll possibly be able to go twice in some turn cycles, but of course it won't be as often. If you go for a slower Yukong, I'd likely still recommend 120 speed, as then she could buff your team and then use the Fleet of Ageless set, which can increase their attack further, or she can buff herself up with the Space Ceiling set depending on what kind of Yukong you're trying to build, but I think both of these options are decent overall. Of course, once she's here, I will be doing testing on what is better rotation wise, if I would recommend the speed boots or attack boots, and so on, but ultimately it may be honestly dependent on what characters you are using with Yukong. For Yukong Teams, I'd recommend her either as a sub DPS or a complete support or even a breaker. And she can work well with characters like Luocha due to how she may possibly be able to buff his own healing due to her increasing the attack of teammates. Welts can be a good option as well, as he is a strong sub DPS and Yukong can buff him, and most DPS characters can take advantage of Yukong's skill kit. I personally want to try Clara, Yukong, and a Luocha team and see how that does, since it might be quite strong overall. The main character who may not care about Yukong's buffs or benefit as much would possibly be Yang, as he can increase his crit rate by quite a lot. However, he could still use the crit damage and attack buffs, but I would likely pair her with a different DPS if I can control that, who could take more full advantage of her skill kit. As for my personal thoughts on Yukong, I think she'll be an excellent supportive character. She may seem a bit more restrictive by her turn cycle dependency, however there are definitely ways to go about it and have great success with this character, especially if you are able to fine-tune your teams to fully benefit from her. I think Yukong will also be quite versatile, as you can do break Yukong, sub DPS, full support, and so on, which gives you a few options in how you can go about building her. I'll go over my recommendations fully once she's here, and I can fully test her to give my full builds on what I found the most success with and what options you can pick from overall. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to subscribe to see more Star Rail content from me. Leave a like to support the video. And for the question of the day, what is your favorite RPG? It can be Star Rail if it is your favorite, but for me, it's definitely Persona 5. I had such a good experience with that game, and I even bought my whole PS4 just to play that game. But, you know, that's a little bit of moon lore right there. I bought a whole PlayStation 4 just to play Persona 5. I think that just says something about me as a person, though. But of course, I hope all of you have a nice one. Peace.